Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down the mechanics of calm expression and why your boring stories are actually your most profitable assets.
Yeah, it sounds completely counterintuitive right out of the gate, doesn't it?
It really does. We are so conditioned, almost biologically at this point, to believe that profitability comes from excitement.
Right. We think it comes from the hype, the noise, the flashy editing, the loud music, all of it.
Exactly. But the data we're looking at today and the psychological profiling of these high-value clients we've been analyzing, it suggests the exact opposite.
It does. And honestly, just looking over this stack of notes, it feels like a massive relief.
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of people listening to this right now are going to feel a physical weight lift off their shoulders when we get into the mechanics here.
I hope so,
Yeah.
because we are so conditioned to perform. But today we're focusing on this concept called calm expression.
But before we get to the solution, we really have to diagnose the problem. The source material identifies a very specific condition. They call it performance fatigue.
Yeah, performance fatigue.
Now, when I first read that, my immediate thought was, okay, surely they just mean regular burnout, working too many hours.
Yeah.
But looking closer at the notes, this isn't just about being physically tired, is it?
No, not at all. And that is a really critical distinction we need to make early on here. Burnout is usually a resource issue.
Like time or energy.
Right. You're out of time or you're out of glucose. You're just physically depleted from the grind. But performance fatigue, that is a narrative issue.
A narrative issue. Unpack that a bit.
It's a psychological condition. It's where you, as the creator or the business owner, feel this relentless, crushing pressure to maintain a character.
So it's the acting.
Exactly. It is the sheer exhaustion of having to keep the story going, regardless of what is actually happening in your real life.
That is fascinating. So it's not the work itself that's tiring. It's the gap between who you actually are and who you feel you need to be on screen or in your emails.
Yes. It's the psychological toll of believing that every single piece of content you put out into the world has to be a mountaintop moment.
A mountaintop moment.
Right. Just think about the sheer energy required to sustain that. The sources describe a symptomology where the creator feels that if they aren't having some life-changing epiphany
Or a massive business win.
or this huge dramatic emotional breakthrough, then they simply have nothing of value to say to their audience.
They feel that normalcy is essentially a failure state.
That's the perfect way to put it. Normalcy becomes a failure state.
And you see this constantly. You scroll through social media and it feels like everyone is living in a movie trailer.
Literally a movie trailer.
It's all high stakes, dramatic music, rapid cuts. It really feels like if you aren't crying on camera or celebrating $1 million launch, you just don't exist in the algorithm.
And that creates this incredibly warped reality. The baseline for existence suddenly becomes extraordinary.
Which is impossible to maintain. And the sources mention a really specific case study here that I want to touch on. It was a mentee who was essentially, they described him as vibrating with anxiety.
Yes, that case study is so revealing. This student was completely paralyzed by his own strategy. He was totally convinced that he had to manufacture drama out of thin air.
Because he thought he needed those aggressive hooks.
Right. The whole stop scrolling or your business will die kind of energy.
Yeah, the classic fear-mongering hook.
Exactly. He felt he had to perform this version of himself that was just always winning.
Always winning. That is the trap, isn't it? Nobody is always winning.
Yeah.
But let me play devil's advocate for just a second here.
Sure, go for it.
Isn't that what marketing fundamentally is? Highlighting the wins.
Right.
If I go to a restaurant's website, they don't show me a picture of the burnt steak they ruined in the kitchen. They show me the perfectly plated dish. So why is it different for a personal brand or a leader?
That's a really fair pushback. But here's the core difference. A restaurant is selling a consumable product. A leader is selling a relationship. They're selling a capability.
I see where you're going.
If your brand identity is built on this premise that you are constantly victorious, constantly crushing it, constantly standing at the absolute peak of the mountain, you are setting yourself up for an inevitable crash.
Because people aren't stupid. They know it's not real.
Right, and you create this massive distance between you and the audience. If you are literally perfect, you are completely unrelatable.
You become alien to them.
Exactly. And the irony here, which the source material highlights so beautifully, is that this vibration, this frantic energy to be impressive, it actually repels the exact people you want to attract.
It scares them away.
It really does. It scares them away because it feels manic. It feels highly unstable. When you are vibrating with that immense pressure to be interesting, you're signaling to the market that you are not comfortable in your own skin.
You're signaling that you need their attention more than they need your help.
Yes. It entirely shifts the dynamic. It goes from, I have something valuable for you, to, please look at me so I feel validated.
And that is a massive distinction. And the sources use this metaphor that I found incredibly powerful. They call it the straitjacket.
The straitjacket of engagement, yes. This is arguably one of the most dangerous traps for modern creators and entrepreneurs today. It effectively binds you.
Let's unpack that, because we are constantly told to look at the metrics, right? We're told, look at what works, download the templates, do what the viral guys are doing. But the text argues that these proven templates are actually suffocating.
They are suffocating because they strip the humanity out of the process. The source describes creators using these templates that literally feel like a straitjacket. They're rigid, they're confining, and they force you into a shape that isn't naturally yours.
So you end up chasing the engagement metrics, the likes, the shares, the fire emojis.
Right, but you're doing it by completely sacrificing your actual voice. You are contorting yourself to fit an algorithm rather than expanding yourself to fit your leadership role.
So you're getting the applause, but internally you feel trapped. You're winning the game, but you absolutely hate playing it.
Precisely. And the psychological toll there is significant. It's devastating, really, because the underlying belief, the core fallacy, as we might call it, is the idea that you have to fight for attention.
Fight for it. It implies a combat mindset.
Exactly. You wake up every single day thinking, I have to go out there and battle the algorithm today. I have to scream louder than the guy next to me. I have to be epic.
And the analysis here suggests that being epic is actually just exhausting.
Epic is exhausting. For you, the creator, absolutely. But here is the part that we almost always miss. It's exhausting for the audience, too.
Oh, that's a great point.
Think about being in a room with someone who is constantly shouting, someone who is constantly trying to impress you or blow your mind. It's draining.
You don't feel safe with that person. You feel tired.
Right, you feel like you have to be fully on just to consume their content.
It's like having a friend who is constantly performing a stand-up comedy routine in your living room. Like, sometimes you just want to sit and have a quiet coffee.
Yeah.
You want the pressure in the room to lower, not rise.
That's a perfect analogy. And if we look at the goal of this strategy session, which is to move towards calm expression, we have to realize that when a creator is vibrating with that pressure, when they're trapped in that straitjacket of trying to be epic, they are making it fundamentally impossible to lead.
They are just performing.
Exactly. And that brings us directly to the major shift the sources talk about. Section 2 of our discussion today is about this critical transition from entertainer to leader.
The source material draws a really hard line in the sand here. It says, performance is for actors, connection is for authorities. That feels like a very surgical separation of two entirely different career paths.
Honestly, that is the quote that should probably be on a sticky note on everyone's computer monitor.
Right.
Performance is for actors. If you are treating your content, your marketing, your daily communication as a performance, you are categorized in the mind of the audience as an entertainer.
And we have to ask ourselves what the actual utility of an entertainer is.
Exactly.
Because entertainment is valuable. We love movies, we love concerts, and if you look at the biggest influencers in the world, many of them are strictly entertainers, and they are incredibly wealthy. So is the text saying we shouldn't be entertaining? Or is this just a categorization issue?
It is entirely a categorization issue regarding what it is you are actually selling.
Okay, clarify that.
If you are selling distraction, if you are Netflix or a comedian or a prank channel on YouTube, then yes, by all means, be a performer, be as loud and flashy as possible.
Yeah.
But the people listening to this strategy session right now, they are usually selling expertise.
They're selling transformation.
Right. They are selling high-stakes solutions to complex business or life problems.
That makes total sense.
Right.
You don't go to a comedian to manage your retirement fund. So there is an audience reaction matrix implicit in this, isn't there?
Yes. It's a binary outcome in the market. If your content feels like a performance, the audience treats you like an entertainer.
They might clap.
They might clap. They might give you they might say, wow, that was an intense video. But, and this is the crucial part for monetization, they do not pay entertainers to solve high-stakes problems.
Right. You pay an entertainer to distract you from your life. You pay a leader to help you fix your life.
That's it, exactly.
Like, I wouldn't hire a clown to perform open heart surgery, no matter how good his juggling act is in the waiting room.
I would certainly hope not. But if the content feels like calm expression, the audience treats you like a leader. They treat you like an authority. And people pay authorities to fix their businesses, to solve the mess. This distinction literally dictates the ceiling of your income.
So if you are stuck in that entertainer bucket, you might have incredibly high engagement, you might have a ton of eyeballs on your stuff, but you could be completely broke.
Or at the very least, you're working 10 times harder for every single dollar you make. You see this all the time in the industry. Influencers with massive, sprawling followings who cannot sell a single high-ticket offer.
Why is that?
Because nobody trusts them with the steering wheel. They are the clown in the circus, and they aren't the captain of the ship. Trust is a fundamentally different currency than attention.
That's profound. You can have $1 million worth of attention and $0 worth of trust.
Exactly. Now, the sources mention this concept of the hype hangover. There is a story here about a creator who is absolutely terrified of being boring.
Oh, yes. It's such a common fear. This specific creator believed that if he didn't have a massive, dramatic, rags-to-riches story every single Tuesday, his audience would just forget he existed.
Just imagine the cortisol levels required to maintain that kind of belief system. He was fully convinced that relevance required constant, ongoing revolution.
Rags to riches every Tuesday. It sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud like that, but that is the pressure people feel. It's like a soap opera where a character has to come back from the dead every week just to keep the ratings up.
And eventually, the audience just rolls their eyes and changes the channel.
Because it stops being believable.
Right. He was living in this constant state of narrative pressure, manufacturing drama, where there literally was none. Like, oh, the coffee machine broke this morning. Let me turn this into a massive 3-act play about resilience and overcoming adversity.
Yeah, here is what my broken latte taught me about scaling to 7 figures in 30 days. We've all seen those exact posts.
We have, and it's absurd. But you have to realize it comes from a place of genuine fear.
The fear that I am not enough.
Yes, the fear that my normal day-to-day life is not interesting enough to hold people's attention. But the reality check the sources provide here is brutal. It is completely impossible to maintain a performance forever. The show eventually causes burnout. And when the show stops, if that's all you had, you are left with nothing.
So the alternative to this exhaustion is what the text calls the value of subtraction. This seems to be the true philosophical core of the whole argument today. It's not about adding more noise to stand out. It's about taking the noise away.
Subtraction is absolutely the key. True authority is the ability to share the truth without all the bells and whistles. It's a paradox that the source material highlights so well. When you finally stop trying to hook people...
Hook them like a fish. Drag them in against their will.
Right. When you stop hooking them, you actually start holding them.
Holding them, that is a very different verb. Hooking implies force. It actually implies pain, if you think about it. Holding implies something else entirely.
It implies a relationship. It implies safety. A true leader creates a container where the audience feels understood and safe. A performer just creates a fleeting spectacle.
So when you subtract the hype, when you subtract the aggressive jump cut editing, when you subtract the manufactured emotional drama, what is actually left?
You are left with the truth. And truth, spoken plainly and calmly, is incredibly magnetic. It's so rare in today's market that it stands out immediately.
Okay, let's get into the actual mechanics of this. We've diagnosed the problem performance fatigue. We've identified the shift we need to make from entertainer to leader. Now let's move to section 3. The mechanics of calm expression. What is it in practice? Because I think some people hear the word calm and they immediately hear sleepy.
They hear low energy.
Yeah, they hear, I'm going to bore my audience to death and my metrics will tank.
And that is the absolute biggest misconception we need to clear up today. Calm expression is not about being boring in the sense of being uninteresting. It is not about speaking in a monotone voice. It is about being certain.
Certainty.
Yes. It is about speaking from a place of simple, unhurried truth rather than calculated impact.
Unhurried truth. I love that phrasing. It feels very confident. It implies that time is on your side.
It suggests that you are not rushing to convince anyone of anything. You are not desperate for their validation. You are simply stating what is objectively true, what you have observed in your work, and what you know to be highly valuable.
Because a person who runs into a room screaming is usually afraid.
Exactly. But a person who walks into a room slowly and speaks clearly, that person is usually in charge.
The text uses a really great analogy here that I think clears up the whole boring accusation. The anchor versus the circus act.
This helps visualize the concept perfectly. Imagine a client who is currently in a storm. Their business is messy, their personal life is chaotic, their revenue is down, they are highly stressed. What do they actually need in that moment? Do they need a juggler?
No,
Do they need someone doing backflips and shooting off fireworks?
definitely not. They need someone to stop the boat from crashing into the rocks. The fireworks would just add to the sheer chaos they are already feeling.
Exactly. They need an anchor. They need something heavy, something solid, something immovable. Calm expression signals to the market that the leader is centered. It signals, I can handle this mess. I am not freaking out, so you don't need to freak out either.
While the circus act is just signaling, look at me, look at me.
Right. But the anchor signals, I have got you. You are safe here.
There is a really specific case study in the notes that drives this home tactically. It's the boring story exercise. Walk us through this, because I think this is where the rubber meets the road for anyone listening who wants to actually implement this today.
This is a fascinating tactical example from the source material. The mentor had a student who was deeply struggling with her storytelling. She was terrified she was losing her edge in the market.
Because she didn't have any major dramatic wins to report that week.
Exactly. She felt her content was getting stale. She was actively looking for that dopamine hit of high engagement. So the mentor gave her an assignment specifically designed to break her addiction to the hype.
And what was the assignment?
The assignment was to write about a conversation with a client that did not go as planned.
And there were very strict constraints on this, right? She couldn't spin it at the end. She couldn't wrap it all up in a pretty bow.
Extremely strict constraints. Absolutely no life-changing breakthroughs allowed in the copy, no secret sauce revealed at the very end to save the day, no moral of the story where she emerges as the hero.
Wow.
She just had to write an honest, straightforward reflection on a human interaction that was difficult. Just the plain facts of the difficulty.
That sounds genuinely terrifying for a modern content creator.
Yeah.
We are so heavily trained to have the payoff, and then I made $1 million moment, or at least and then we hugged and cried and learned a valuable lesson moment.
Mm-hmm.
To just leave it unresolved, it feels incredibly vulnerable.
She was absolutely terrified. She thought the audience would read it and think she was incompetent, or worse, that she was just plain boring. She literally thought, if I post this, my market will think I'm losing my edge and they'll leave.
But she did it anyway.
She did. She posted this boring story about a messy, entirely unresolved conversation with a client.
And what was the market response?
It was the exact opposite of what she feared. Instead of boredom or unfollows, she got the highest engagement she had ever seen on a piece of content.
But it wasn't the superficial engagement, was it?
No, not at all. It wasn't the fire emojis. It wasn't
Yeah.
the superficial comments that feel good for 2 seconds but mean absolutely nothing for your bottom line.
It was real conversation.
It was long, deeply thoughtful paragraphs. People were leaving comments saying, oh my God, I went through this exact same thing last week. Or, thank you so much for saying this. I honestly thought I was the only one struggling with this.
So the metric fundamentally shifted from applause to resonance.
Yes, from entertainment to relation. The audience moved from being entertained by her to feeling related to by her, and that shift right there is the ultimate shortcut to deep trust.
Because when someone feels that you understand their actual reality, not the polished highlight reality, but their actual messy Monday morning reality,
Yeah.
they trust you implicitly.
They do. And that brings us to section 4, because we need to be clear. This isn't just about getting nice comments on the internet. We aren't doing this just to feel warm and fuzzy inside. This is a massive strategic advantage, specifically when you are dealing with high-level clients.
This is where we really talk about the money. Because, frankly, calm expression is a premium strategy. It naturally attracts a premium buyer.
It does.
Why is that exactly? Why do high-level, sophisticated clients respond so well to this calm approach? Is it just because they are smarter?
It's not just raw intelligence. It's sophistication and it's market experience. High-level clients, the people who actually have the budgets, who have been around the block, who have hired multiple consultants before, they have a highly tuned hype detector.
They can sense the act a mile away.
They can feel it in their bones because they have been burned by the hype before. They've bought the flashy programs that delivered nothing.
They know exactly when they are being aggressively sold to.
They know when they are being performed for. The source material puts it very bluntly. Sophisticated buyers are not looking for the hero. They are looking for the human.
They are there for the show. They are there for the solution.
Exactly. They do not want to pay for your elaborate costumes. They want to pay for access to your brain.
So if you are out there doing a massive song and dance on your sales page, The sophisticated buyer looks at that and thinks, why is he trying so incredibly hard?
Yeah.
What is he compensating for?
Right. It immediately raises suspicion. If you are really that good at what you do, why are you screaming at me? If your solution actually works, why do you need this aggressive, manipulative hook?
The silence, the calm itself, implies that the value is self-evident.
Exactly. When you see a high-end Rolls-Royce advertisement, they aren't screaming at you about financing options. They are usually very quiet. The imagery is still.
That is a phenomenal analogy. Luxury is quiet. Desperation is loud.
It always is.
There is a deep psychological point in the notes here that ties into this, called the paradox of inadequacy. Let's dig into that.
This is a heavy concept, but we really need to unpack it for the listeners. The statement from the source is, every time you perform for your audience, you're telling them that you aren't enough as you are.
Wow. So the act itself is literally an admission of your own insecurity.
Yes, it operates as a subconscious signal to the market. By putting on the mask, by artificially pumping up the volume of your personality, you are implicitly saying, me, just as I am, my raw knowledge, my actual experience, it's just not enough to hold your attention, so I have to become this entirely other thing to trick you into watching.
You are telling the audience that your core value is insufficient.
And the audience picks up on that insecurity. Even if they can't articulate it consciously, they feel it in their gut. Performing teaches the audience to value the show over the substance.
You are literally training them to like the mask, not the person behind it.
Exactly. But calm expression does the opposite. It validates that the creator is enough. It says, I am standing right here without the pyrotechnics, without the hype, and I am telling you the unvarnished truth.
And that builds massive, undeniable authority.
It says, I am not here to impress you. I am here to help you. And that leads directly into what the notes call the profitability of boredom.
The profitability of boredom. I feel like that should be the title of a best-selling business book. Why exactly are these boring stories the most profitable ones you can tell?
Because they are the stories people can actually see themselves in. They are highly actionable. If you tell a story about standing on a yacht in Dubai, most of your audience can't relate to that. They can't action that.
Right, but the hero trap is the exact opposite of this. And I think we all fall into this trap at some point. We desperately want to be the hero of the story. We want to be the one who slayed the dragon and saved the village.
Most entrepreneurs deeply believe they need to be the hero with all the answers, the knight in shining armor riding in. But here is the hard truth of marketing. People do not buy from heroes. They admire heroes. They put heroes on pedestals. But they buy from guides.
They buy from people who understand the rough terrain they are currently walking through.
Yes. The hero is far too busy being the main character of their own movie. The guide is completely focused on the client's survival.
And the text says that true authority is, quote, standing in the middle of the mess and describing it calmly.
That is such a vivid, powerful image. Imagine a burning building. The person running around in circles screaming, fire, fire, is not the leader. That person is just part of the overall panic.
Right.
The person standing completely still, pointing clearly to the exit and saying in a steady voice, walk this way. That is the leader.
And doing that gives your audience permission to stop performing too.
That is the ultimate gift you give your market. When you finally drop the act, you create a safe space where actual business can happen. You signal, hey, we don't have to pretend here anymore. We don't have to posture. We can just openly talk about the problem and how we are going to fix it together.
And that is exactly where the transaction happens. That is where the contract actually gets signed, in those quiet, honest moments of truth, not during the loud moments of performance. So we are completely sold on the concept. We understand deeply why performance is draining, why it repels high-level clients, and why calm is inherently profitable. Now we need to move to section 5, which is implementation.
How do we actually execute this?
Right. How do we do this on a Tuesday morning when we sit down to write an email? Because it's really hard to break these old marketing habits. The notes talk about shifting to the leading voice.
The pivot here is moving away from the shouting voice and settling into the leading voice. It's moving from manufacturing drama to simple observation.
Observation seems to be a key word there. You aren't inventing things. You're just noticing things.
You are witnessing reality. You are sharing small, steady wins and quiet shifts in identity rather than these massive, unbelievable, dramatic arcs. You are paying close attention to the tiny details that everyone else in your industry completely overlooks because they are way too busy trying to find their next viral hook.
The leader sees the nuance that the entertainer misses.
Precisely. Let's look at the practical example provided in the sources, the workflow story. This was another student from the case studies, correct?
Yes, this recaps that same mentee we mentioned earlier who was vibrating with anxiety. He finally decided to share a story about a very minor mistake in his daily workflow. He lost a file or forgot a minor step in an administrative process.
Now, typically, the standard marketing guru advice for a post like that would be tell them about the mistake and then immediately tell them the 5 secret steps you took to fix it and how that mistake ultimately made you a millionaire.
Right, the hustle spin. You have to turn every single failure into a massive success story immediately. You aren't allowed to just let the failure sit there on the page.
But he didn't do that. He didn't add the hustle spin. He didn't artificially inflate it into a masterclass lesson on winning. He just let the bare facts sit there. He wrote, I did this. It didn't work. Here is what I honestly noticed about my flawed process. And here's what I'm thinking about changing next week.
It's so simple. And what was the actual result of that post?
The weight of his authority was deeply felt by his audience, precisely because he didn't feel the need to shout about it. It demonstrated supreme confidence. It showed them that he wasn't terrified of his own minor imperfections.
It made him feel like a senior practitioner in his field,
Yeah,
not some junior marketer desperately trying to prove his worth.
exactly. A junior tries to hide their mistakes or spin them. A senior simply analyzes them out loud.
It really feels like this is the only sustainable way to build a personal brand over a decade. The notes call this concept scaling the soul.
If you build a brand based purely on performance, you are actively building a prison for yourself. You have to wake up and show up every single day and put on that heavy costume. But if you build a brand based on calm expression, based on your actual real-time thoughts and observations, you are just being yourself.
And you can scale that forever.
You can. You never run out of content because you never run out of your own life.
You don't lose your soul to the algorithm. You don't slowly become a bizarre caricature of yourself over time.
No, you don't. But it heavily relies on a massive identity shift. You have to start trusting your own silence. You have to fundamentally understand that a story told with unhurried clarity is 10 times more resonant and 10 times more profitable than a story told with frantic hype.
Unhurried clarity, that really is the ultimate goal here. It sounds so peaceful compared to the alternative we've been discussing.
It is deeply peaceful. And it is highly profitable. It is the literal definition of freedom in this specific context of content creation.
We are coming to the end of this deep analysis, and I want to make absolutely sure we leave you, the listener, with something concrete to execute. Section 6 is the conclusion and directives. We need to do an identity check right now.
Yes. Ask yourself right now, wherever you are listening to this strategy session, are you currently building an entertainer brand or are you building a leader brand?
Are you telling stories to connect with people, or are you telling stories just to impress them?
That is the fundamental defining question of your business. If you are trying to impress, you are performing. If you are trying to connect, you are leading.
And we have a very specific tactical challenge pulled straight from the source material for you today. The daily objective.
Here is the challenge for you. Share one single story today that has absolutely zero hype.
Zero hype. That is going to feel incredibly naked for some people listening.
It will feel uncomfortable at first, but tell it simply. Tell it honestly. And then move on with unhurried clarity. Do not try to make it epic. Do not try to reverse engineer it to go viral. Just make it true.
Take the stage, but leave the act behind.
That is the absolute mantra going forward. Start winning the game of actual human connection, rather than constantly trying to win the award for best actor on the internet. Because at the end of the day, the actor only gets the fleeting applause, but the leader gets the movement. The leader gets the deep trust.
And in business, trust is the only currency that actually matters. Which leaves me with one final thought for everyone to mull over today. If your audience is already exhausted by the noise everywhere else, what if your silence, your calm, is actually the loudest and most disruptive hook you possess?
That is exactly it. The world has more than enough noise right now. It desperately needs more calm.
If you're ready to stop the act and start the conversation, visit 365freedom.online. This has been another 365 Freedom Strategy session.